Let us pray. Wise and loving God, may the words of my mouth tonight and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you tonight and always. Amen. Well, it's been the buzz on Marco Island this weekend. Temperature records have been set today, and more records are going to be set tomorrow. If you're here visiting from the Northeast or from the Midwest, what you need to know is that we on Marco Island don't know cold and we don't do cold very well. In fact, I learned an interesting statistic this past week from the Marco Island Association of Realtors. Less than 3% of single-family homes on Marco Island have a chimney. This, of course, presents a challenge for Santa Claus. I learned about this challenge some 6 years ago now when my then 4-year-old would not go to sleep on a Christmas Eve. And parents and grandparents who are here tonight, you know that it's an extraordinary task to get your child to go to sleep on Christmas Eve. And he's up and I'm trying to get him to go to sleep because it's a big day the next day. And I said, Nolan, what are you doing? And he said, Dad, I'm unlocking the latch on our sliding glass door. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And he said, well, you know the story of Santa and the chimney and the reindeer, but we don't have a chimney. And I was thinking, you know, with Santa and all those presents, the easiest way for him to get to our home is to ride in a pontoon boat down the canal. And there my son was, unlocking the back sliding glass door so that he could get in. Santa in a pontoon boat. I couldn't even come up with that. You know, sometimes it takes a child to solve some of the most complicated problems that there are. Do you think God knows that? I do. For on this Christmas Eve, we note that God has the option to solve the complex problems of our world via some kind of adult mechanism. As one theologian pointed out, God could have come to us on Christmas Eve via ballot or battle, but instead God chose a baby because maybe, just maybe, it takes a child. Maybe God was onto something. That children can perhaps solve that which is complex even better than we adults. Some weeks ago, the wellness teacher at my children's school asked parents to read a book entitled Seen But Not Heard. It was written by a psychologist by the name of Jana Lane Moore. And in that book, she argued that we ought to do a better job of listening to our children because they can actually help us to problem solve. Whereas we adults often come into a problem with something that we know to be real or true, children do not carry with them that kind of baggage. And so they're perhaps able to solve problems even better than we adults. And even some complex problems can be solved by children. Dad, let's unlock the latch of that sliding glass door. In fact, the book mentioned a NASA study from back in 2011 where children ages 4 and 5 were all polled in their ability to do divergent thinking. Divergent thinking defined by coming up with creative, different solutions to the same problem. And 98% of children tested were tested at a genius level, if you can believe that. What if children are able to solve problems better than we adults at times? What if it takes a child? I was reading a lot of news stories over the past couple of weeks about everything that's going on in Russia. Of course, Zelensky talked to Congress and was talking about Russia, and we've also been following the story of the American prisoners that are over in Russia. And in reading one of these articles about Russia, there was an author of an article that was talking about the current present-day Russia and Russia back in the Cold War. And the author reminded me of a very interesting figure in American history, Samantha Smith. She was 10 years old, and in 1982, she was very frustrated in hearing about nuclear war that was escalating over in the Far East, and she told her mother, "You know what? I am going to write them a letter." And Samantha Smith penned a letter and decided that she would put it into the mail, quoted back her faith to the Kremlin, saying we ought to be good stewards of the creation, and then mailed the letter off and asked in the letter that they would actually write back. And do you know, historians disagree on the impact that her letter may have had? But I will tell you this, in interviewing some of the communist leaders over in Russia, it impacted them big time, so much so that Samantha Smith's picture is in the Smithsonian. Very, very interesting. What if it takes a child? You see, so often when we consider the problems of our world and the complexities of our lives, we do so with that kind of adult pessimism and that kind of adult sarcasm, and we mumble things under our breath like it'll be like it's always been, or it is what it is, or that's just the way it is. But what if there is a possibility that the world might change not through any one of us adults? What if it takes a child? I mean, I don't know about you, but this Christmas Eve, when I think about the complexities and hurt that are in our world, I realize that I don't need just any old God tonight. I need a God with divergent thinking. I mean, this is Christmas Eve 2022. We've got a triple-demic going on. We've got a snowstorm that is more powerful than anyone we've seen in 100 years. We've got the threat of a recession in the early part of 2023. It's a mess up in Washington, D.C. The world is at war. What if in all of the complexity of this world, we don't need another adult solution? We don't need another adult battle or another adult ballot. What if what we need is a baby? It takes a child. What if we need a baby who can look at the complexity of our world and say with wonder and imagination and creativity and possibility, there is a way that this world can change? I don't know about you, but I am hungry for a God who is childish enough tonight to dare call himself the Prince of Peace, to dare say that lions can lie down with lambs. I don't know about you, but I'm hungry tonight for a God who is childish enough to love us in the way we need to be loved, without the bias and without the judgment. I don't know about you, but I'm hungry for a God tonight. If you're anything like me, if you've experienced any kind of loss recently, I'm hungry for a God who will share back with us the possibility of another world that is heaven, something more than just the adult steps of grief. I'm hungry for that God who will come to me as a child. And tonight, the good news is that we've got it. God, in all of God's glory, comes to be with us in the form of a child to change, yes, even this world. I mean, sometimes it takes a child. But you know, it's tough. For there's an irony to all this when you think about it. In order to believe that God can come and solve all the problems of a complex world in the form of a child, in order to believe that on Christmas Eve, you actually have to have childlike faith. In fact, Jesus may have anticipated this. For 30 years after being born in a manger in Bethlehem, Jesus was teaching his disciples, and he said, "Let the little children come to me." And then he shared back with his disciples, "I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like one of these little children, you will never get it. You will never get me, and you will never get my kingdom of heaven." On Christmas Eve, Believing takes a child. You see, we adults on Christmas Eve, we approach it with so much baggage. And in approaching it with so much baggage, we whisper with kind of pessimism, okay, preacher, you say that God is coming to us in the form of a child? Yeah, right. That's like Santa coming in a pontoon boat. I mean, have you heard the story of the man who was fishing one day on Lake Loch Ness? This is a really interesting story. The man did not believe in God. He was fishing out on Lake Loch Ness. And suddenly the legendary Loch Ness monster swam underneath his boat and flipped him into the air. And so as he was flipping in the air, the scene just stopped and he yelled out to God, God, help me. I need your help. And God said back to him from the heavens, I thought you didn't believe in me. And the man said, well, God, give me a break. 2 minutes ago, I didn't believe in the Loch Ness monster either. The Loch Ness monster, Santa, Jesus, when it comes to that divergent thinking that we need in order to believe on Christmas Eve, it doesn't take the thinking of an adult. It takes the thinking of a child. But when we are willing to embrace God coming to us as a little baby, wonder and positivity and hope and love and joy come into our lives. For we see that perhaps, just perhaps, our world can change and our lives can change as well. But it takes a child. I'll close this evening with the final story. It comes from the great German theologian Helmut Thielicke. It's a story that comes from back in post-World War II Germany in 1955. And Thielicke and his family were enduring a very, very hard year, and times were tough. It was a year not unlike 2022. And for the family there in post-World War II Germany, money was very, very tight. And it was around Christmas time, and their family was trying to figure out how they were going to make it into the new year. And Thielicke had a son, and his name was Rainer. And Rainer was a real cut-up, but they absolutely loved Rainer. And they realized that on one occasion, 2 days before Christmas, that all of Dad's very expensive cigars were nowhere to be found in the house. Mom and Dad were looking for them everywhere, and then finally, on the morning of Christmas Eve, Mom was out raking in her rose garden, and she noticed that there were all these cigars in the soil of her rose garden. So they approached, it had to be Rainer. They approached Rainer about it and said, Rainer, what were you thinking? And he said, well, I was trying to help our family. I believed that if I planted cigars in the soil, God would grow cigar trees from them. And Mom and Dad said, oh, we could not punish Rainer in that moment for such childlike faith. For really and truly, he was trying to help us. And Thielicke said that's a lot like the virgin birth of Jesus Christ on Christmas Eve. It makes no botanical or biological sense. The New England Journal of Medicine can't figure it out. It is something that is wondrous, and it is something that is deeply mysterious. And in looking back on that occasion, Thielicke said it was our young boy, our 6-year-old, who helped us that Christmas Eve to believe in the impossible. It takes a child. In a quiet moment tonight, with the faith of a 4-year-old or with the faith of a 6-year-old, unlock the sliding glass door of your heart and believe.